Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a great event on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use the question and answer tab on your interface and submit your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. We also have a very interactive chat feature that I am noticing that people are already starting to use, which I think is awesome. But anyway, at any time during today's presentation, if you have a comment, suggestion, whatever you want to chat out to us, please do. We encourage it. We might even chat you back. And then also at the end of today's webinar, we are going to be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is PKI as Code, automating PKI deployment with Ansible. Our speakers today are Edgar Pombal, who is the DevOps and Systems Administrator Trust Center Siemens, and Thomas Gustafsson, who is the CTO at PrimeKey. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very, very excited about today's webinar. I can't wait to get started.
Thank you, Charlene.
You bet. Now, Thomas, I know you're going to be getting us started with the presentation, so I'm going to take myself off camera, put myself on mute, and I'll see you guys when we get to the question and answer period.
Thank you, Charlene. So welcome to this presentation on, as we said, PKI as Code, or with the subtitle of Automating PKI Deployments with Ansible, which we'll, of course, get into a lot more in just a second. So, yeah, as mentioned, presenters are me, Thomas Gustafsson, CTO of PrimeKey. I've been working with PKI for a long time, since 1994, and specialized on that and developing open source software for PKI and IT security. And together here we have Edgar. Go ahead, Edgar.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. So I work at Siemens as system administrator, DevOps, on the Trust Center team, I would say for almost 6-7 years. And yeah, so today we will show you how can we use automation to do a really nice job deploying PKI. So go ahead, Thomas.
Thanks. So a short agenda for today. So first we have this introduction, kind of, and then Edgar will go into demonstrating Siemens product PKI and how you deploy PKI as code using Ansible, including a demo of how it looks in reality. After that, I will go through some open source playbooks that we have available for anyone to automate PKI with. And after that, some questions and answers, as Charlene mentioned. So I think we'll probably be around 45 minutes for the presentation and demo, and then, hammer in your questions in the meantime, and we'll go over them. A short introduction. So why PKI or automation of PKI with Ansible? Of course, similar to any kind of why automation. It gives you speedy deployments and perhaps very important reproducible deployments. And in PKI, that means you have a lab environment where you want to test new things. So you move it to test, QA, and production eventually, and you want the environments to be as similar as possible. And of course, PKI being security infrastructure, security is of utmost importance. So all the things about securing the environment, hardening, etc., where you want to make sure that nothing is forgotten. Well, that automation helps you with that. And of course, increase agility for today's organization, which needs new features, deploy new product lines, or anything, things that Edgar will talk more about it really gives you orders of magnitude of increased agility. Also with a kind of a class historically very static environment as PKI, which necessarily isn't as static anymore. There are some requirements for to able to pull this off. Well, you need to have some automation-friendly products, and you need to have a good automation framework, and also you need to have a bit of agile organization that can actually consume the new agility and automated PKI to get the best benefit from it. With that short introduction, I'll hand over to you, Edgar, to present the product PKI and the PKI as code.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Okay, so I will show an example of a thing we did here at Siemens. So it's our success story using automation to deploy PKI for a specific service. So it's called product PKI. It is one of multiple services that we provide here in the Trust Center, but we will focus on this one. So the agenda for this presentation. So first I will try to explain what is the product PKI, just to get in context. Show our old architecture, why we need to replace that old environments, why Ansible, and then so speaking about the advantages of using automation, consistency, knowledge, documentation. Then I will speak also a little about Ansible Tower, and then Git, Jenkins, and what we achieved. So continuing. So what is the Siemens product PKI? So the certificate management service of the product PKI is, well, a central service for the management of certificates. So issuance, renewal, revocation to the Siemens business units, so they can use them on their products and solutions. So the product PKI services are operated in the highly secure Siemens Trust Center, and the use cases of the certificates issued by the certificate authorities, or CAs, have a really wide range, as we can see here. For example, they can be used in the rail automation, so for operations control, safety systems, and products for monitoring and controlling, factory automation, integrated automation solutions, verticals with discrete manufacturing systems, and building automation, so solutions to monitor, operate, and improve building control systems. So this is just for curiosity. So this we can see here the number of certificates issued by this product PKI. So yeah, continuing. So here we can see what we had in the past, our old architecture. So just trying to explain what we got here. So we had a PPKI test or dev environment, a QA, and a prod line. So, and we wanted to update this old infrastructure. And why do we need to replace these PPKI environments? First, because we had old system images, old applications, we want to do some improvements, have consistent environments, and of course, one of the major problems of the companies nowadays, old and incomplete documentation of how to set up and configure the complete system. So here, now with some pictures, so we had our base images were Enterprise Linux version 6. So we want to be on, or want to have Linux 7, also for the EJBCA from PrimeKey. We were using an outdated version and we want to update. Same for JBoss, MariaDB, Apache. And speaking about improvements, so we want to get rid of our Apache Tomcat on our CMP proxy and use JBoss. So why Ansible? So this is the main question here. So Ansible is a declarative and imperative language. So we here want to have infrastructure as code. It's simple. It's YAML based. Desired state description language. So we have playbooks and roles made of plays and tasks. Parameters in a central place describe each environment. So inventory made of hosts, groups, and variables. And here we can see some of the advantages of using automation, in this case, with Ansible. So let's check here the example of a manual process. Here we have an example for a database machine. So if we want to set up this manually, so first of all, we have to deploy the base system image. Then we need to do the operative system configurations like IP, hosts, etc. The hardening of the operative system, partitions for logs and data, install all the needed applications, configure the applications and logging, set passwords, permission, hardening of the applications, import, restore databases, and, well, in the end, let's hope we didn't forget something. With automatic deploy with Ansible, the same example, we can just run a single playbook to do all the needed steps. So we can configure a workflow to do all the needed steps for that. And also, for if we want to test something that we changed on the machine, some new feature, well, it's a recursive task, more time-consuming, chance for errors. With automated testing, using Ansible, it's more fast, less time-consuming, no errors, and we can have automated reports. One of the big advantages of also using Ansible is because it's really nice and it's quite faster to set up multiple test environments. So in this case, we call them labs. So we can have multiple labs, test multiple features at the same time. So every developer tester can have its own lab if he needs, and we can do version control, and we can have a repository for our code. Also, using this method of work, using automation, we can have consistent environments. So we can ensure both lines have exactly the same configurations. The code is the same for all the lines. And old and incomplete documentation of how to set up and configure the complete system. So with Ansible scripting, every task needed to perform an operation is documented in the code. So our code is the documentation. The documentation is always up to date. We need to make sure that it's always up to date, but yeah. So documentation and knowledge stays in the team. So this reduces also the or avoid the external help, because sometimes we have people that are experts in one thing, people that are experts on other thing. So we avoid the need of external help, because now everything is coded. So every task is well described on the Ansible code. So we know exactly what the specific task does. And here we have our Ansible Tower. So we use this together with Ansible Core, but Ansible Tower is a web GUI for role-based access control, where we can have job templates, logging and auditing, and works with REST API. And we can always have support from the Red Hat professional services. Testing. Testing via Git Jenkins. So in this case, the code is committed to GitLab. GitLab webhooks calls are sent to Jenkins. Jenkins rebuilds GitLab projects and update them automatically. And the Ansible syntax check is performed and Ansible code review is performed. So every night our sandbox lab is rebuilded and end-to-end tests are performed. So it rebuilds VMs, OS updates, hardening, check the application availability. So it's really nice to have all of this working, because we can have a nice report every day and check if everything is working as it should. It's really nice. And this is our current architecture. So we have our Ansible Tower machines, and we have our Ansible core. And here we can see we have now multiple labs, or we can have multiple labs. And all of those machines are also being monitored, of course. Okay, now let's check here a video. Okay. This video is a demo of how we can deploy a VA and a database machine to have, to deploy a CA and a database machine to have an environment working. So you will see that it's something really easy, really fast to do. So yeah, so let's. First,
problems with the audio while it worked for some. Can you maybe just try to mute and unmute again to see if there's something with the platform?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm unmuted. Everything
Yeah,
okay now?
I hear you fine.
Yeah,
Brian,
okay.
it looks like people can hear you now. That's great. Thank you. Appreciate that,
No
Edgar.
problem, no problem. I will continue then. If happens again, please just notify me and I will, well, see what I can do here on my side.
Yeah.
Let's get back here a little bit. Okay, you can see that we have the AGBCA fully deployed. So the only manual effort that we had here was to click on the workflows to start. So as you can see, very simple, very easy. Once you have everything configured on the Ansible core side, once you have all watching. If you have any questions, you can do the questions and we will try to answer them later. So yeah, thank you, and the stage is yours, Thomas.
Thank you, Edgar. That is a great demo, so I can watch that several times, sure. So moving on in the presentation, I have first a small recap, and then we'll show you some open source playbooks that are available on GitHub and how they work. So a short recap is that we have showed why automating PKI is a good idea with the time savings, the consistency, repeatability, and enabling your organization to be very agile and move with new use cases, test new things, etc., to be able to actually reap new opportunities or new production lines, or fail fast if you want to test something and it doesn't work. You can just scrap it and start a new lab test environment, as Edgar showed here. And we also talked showed the actual tooling to do it. So the last part here will be a little bit about our developers' Ansible playbooks, which are available on GitHub. So some challenge that can be solved, solution, of course, which is similar to what Edgar just showed us, and also connecting back to an online workshop that you can run yourself. And of course, it's open for collaboration. Well, so One challenge that our tech team or deployment team actually solved in reality was to deploy a really large-scale PKI. So I don't expect you to actually see the icons there, but on the top reflects the physical deployment, which is about 14 virtual machine nodes, some on a cluster of certificate authorities, which are multi-tenant. Some of the machines for validation authorities, OCSP, some for registration authorities, etc. So a fair number of machines. And the logical infrastructure is 15 CAs in a 3-tier CA hierarchy trust model using external root CA, even offline root CAs. And it's a mix of RSA and ECDSA CAs using network HSMs. You also want to configure access to those and generate keys, etc. And in this specific case, it was a Microsoft SQL database using Kerberos authentication, but it can, of course, be other databases like MariaDB or even Oracle or Postgres, etc. And a custom front-end configuration for nice URL mangling and such. And of course, the solution is to use Ansible. So with the deployment platform for our virtual machines, but you can, of course, use Ansible also if you have containers or be it on-premise or in the cloud. You can mix and match, so to say. The Ansible playbooks are modular. So you can run parts that you want or parts that you don't want. You can customize your deployment to fit your needs with the components that you want to deploy, be it a single CA or with the VAs and RAs or signing services, etc. A key point that also Edgar showed is using Ansible Vault for keeping secrets, because one of the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities are often to have secrets in code. And if you have re-infrastructure in code as code, you don't want to have the secrets in the code. So using a Vault for that mitigates this issue. And as I mentioned, HSM key creation. So this is actually one module of the Ansible playbook. So if you just want to use playbooks for HSM key creation, you can, of course, only use those modules. You don't have to deploy EDBCA, in fact. And the same with database. A part of the playbook modules are for the database, for different databases. So it's, of course, available just those modules that you want. And it's available on GitHub, PrimeKey Devs, which is short for PrimeKey Developers, and Ansible. So open source, everything. It's production quality. It's actually been used to deploy the previously mentioned infrastructure in production. And it's totally open for collaboration. So, of course, there are some keys to success when you do something like this. So one is that you need to have some understanding of Ansible to be able to use the modules in the right way or in your intended way. You have to understand your PKI, what you actually want to do with your PKI, and the operations of your organization. Then it's good to have a dedicated development environment for Ansible, so you can, spin up VMs to test things when you develop the Ansible scripts themselves. And of course, you need an environment so you can quickly provision and deprovision new labs, etc. As Edgar also mentioned, they're using virtual machines, so you can have an environment that Ansible can use to spin up new machines, take them down when needed, etc. Of course, you want source control. Git is a good example of that, but some organizations use something else, which is fine too. And use different plays for the different components. So just a short layout of a Ansible directory structure. I don't think it's very unique to this, but you shows how you separate things. So there's one variables folder, which here it's called deployment info, where you configure the organization specific names, for example, what versions of the software, different softwares you want to deploy. So you can, of course, deploy with different versions of the database, different versions of the CA software, different versions of HSM drivers, etc. Then you have a roles folder, which contains the different roles that you can play to do different things. Configuration file, and maybe more important than the Ansible inventory file, where you configure all the hosts, the IPs, host names that you will deploy. So all these are separated and can be version controlled, and you can have different branches for testing different versions all at the same time. So a more, say, detailed example. So as I mentioned, the variables configuration, variable files, has typical for a CA, you configure the distinguished name, which is the country, organization name, maybe organization unit name, domains, common name, such things. And also the software versions. And then different Ansible roles are being called for, as I mentioned, different tasks, and you can skip some or run some. So if you only want to run the HSM configuration, you can do that. If you only want to do the database upgrade, you can do that. If you want to run a full playbook, more like Edgar showed, where you upgrade a full environment with all the components, you do that. So this is kind of a very flexible way, so you can do what suits your organization best. And since it's so modular, an important piece is idempotency, which in the Ansible definition is that the result of performing an operation once is exactly the same as the result of performing it repeatedly without any intervening actions. So that means you can run the script multiple times and it will have the same result as if you run it once. If you need to check things or network goes down, etc. And finally, I want to mention that there is an online workshop which comes from, we have a yearly conference which is called Prime Key Tech Days, where there are free online workshops. This year we had a workshop which is recorded, which is how to use the Ansible EDBCA playbooks to add CAs, profiles, etc., and have a repeatable configuration. And there is one part of the workshop where it's kind of easy, doesn't deploy such a complex environment that we talked about, but make it an easy for you, anyone that can follow and deploy a small system themselves. And then it's actually deploys a system like this in AWS, one EDBCA node, one Ansible node, and then you run the playbooks to set up and configure the CA for a demo organization. So this is something the online workshop from Tech Days gives you ability to, or shows you how to play with and run yourself. And it's completely open for community collaboration. You can fork it on GitHub. If you want, you can create issues or pull requests, or just take it and use the modules that you find usable. So finally, short summary of what we have seen today. So we saw Edgar talking about the motivation for PKI, motivation for Siemens for PKI automation, which gives a orders of magnitude faster and more consistent deployment. We also saw Edgar give a live demo of how they use PKI deployment using Red Hat Ansible and Ansible Tower. And finally, I showed where you can find open source playbooks on GitHub that you can start with. And that was it. for this presentation, and we're ready for some Q&A, if there's some.
All right, great. Well, we do have a couple questions in, and we do have plenty of time for question and answer period. So if you do have a question for either Thomas or Edgar, please go ahead and put it on into the question and answer period, or the question and answer tab, or you can put it right in the public chat, and we'll be more than happy to move it over for you. Okay, let's see. Rui asked the first question, which is big. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced moving from old to the environment?
I think that one is for me. Yeah, so the big challenges here are mostly related with, well, no documentation and people leaving the team. So at the beginning, we didn't know how to do most of the things. So it was searching, trying, deploying, see if that works, do it again. So it's really difficult when we don't have any base documentation or help of the people, because yeah, so we had an old infrastructure, but no one knows how that work from the beginning, from begin to end. So there was things missing on the JBoss side, MariaDB. So that's what happens when we don't have documentation. And now with Ansible, like I said, all of those tasks are documented. So documentation will no longer be a problem, even if someone leaves the team. Doesn't matter, because the other person can always open the code and check what's happening and try to understand the tasks that are being performed. So the code with Ansible, the code is documentation. I think that answered the question, right? Rui, let me know.
All right, let's see. Tomas has a question, not you, Tomas, the other Tomas, Tomas H. He asks, in case of contingency, is it possible to recover all your PKI infrastructure through Ansible configurations? And does your information system contingency plan make use of Ansible for infrastructure recovery?
Yeah, I think it's for you too, Edgar. I guess
Yeah,
it means,
yeah.
if everything crash and burn, if you can, we also use Ansible to restore the full environment as a disaster recovery.
Yeah, so Ansible does not replace backups, okay? So, for example, in the case of a database machine, of course, we still need to have backups of the database. But Ansible helps a lot in case of disaster, because if something really bad happens, we can set up the entire environment quite fast and without much effort, and then we just import the backup of the database. So Ansible here works more, or it's used more for the configuration. Okay, and of course we can use that on our disaster recovery plan or system contingency plan. But yeah, so I think, yeah, we use that for sure. So, but anyways, it does not replace a backup solution. It just helps redeploying everything, and helps a lot, trust me, but does not replace the backups. Okay.
All right, great. So we have about 10 minutes until the top of the hour. So I think we have time for one or two more well, maybe more than that, but we do have two more questions here in the queue. So hopefully we'll be able to get to both of them. And they're both from Pedro. Pedro's first question is, Edgar, so we know for sure, if you could quantify, how much time would you say it saves you to use Ansible instead of manual deploy?
Okay, so I would say if I have to do the deployment of, let's say, a lab, And in our case, a lab, it's just a couple of machines. So they are, I would say, 10, 11, 12 machines. Just it's what we use for a lab. But if I have to set up this manually, it will it will take days, days. So yeah, and now we can do this well in, I don't know, 1 2 hours. Yeah.
Wow,
So yeah,
that's
it's
pretty.
really amazing. If I have to do everything manually, forget it, because we always have the human factor. Because yeah, sometimes we can do errors. We can change a configuration where it's not supposed to. Um, and with automation, the configuration is always the same. So it's the same configuration for all the labs. And in terms of time consuming, uh, it's much less time consuming. So using Ansible, it's, in this case, it's really amazing. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, Pedro's other question is, with all these different technologies and different applications, how tricky was it to Ansibleize it, all of this?
I think it's all again for me.
Yeah, it's for you to
Yeah, it's for me. Yeah.
answer. Yeah.
Well, it's tricky because, as you know, nowadays on the IT department, or people are specialized in different topics. So there are people specialized on JBoss, on databases, and so on. And with Ansible, of course, you can have a team where you have multiple experts.
Mhm.
That was the perfect scenario. Or in our case, we have to gather all that information from different people and different departments and try to build or create our codes according to our needs. So it's tricky, of course, because we need to gather all of that knowledge. Because yeah, I know about JBoss. I'm not an expert on JBoss, so it's tricky. Yeah, it's very tricky to gather all of this knowledge from different people and
Mhm.
code all of that with Ansible. Yeah.
All right. Well, we have one more question that's come in, and then I think we're going to close out the question and answer period. Abhishek asks, how do you manage configuration, and then in parentheses, security issues within Ansible?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it refers to security issues with Ansible itself or security issues that you code in your Ansible deployments. So maybe I'll start and then you can mention something, Edgar. So I think, of course, if your configuration that which you mentioned includes all the hardening you want to do, and then you have to test it, and well, you may find problems with it in production even, but then you can easily go back and fix it and deploy a new one. It's at least say better than when you have done mistakes and it's not automated, because then you have to do it manually on all different nodes or through scripting, etc. Then, of course, there can be security issues with Ansible itself. Looking through known vulnerabilities or CVEs for Ansible, I see, for example, that some modules exposed credentials, such as secrets logged in plain text on managed nodes. Those are, of course, you have to, as with all components, monitor Ansible for vulnerabilities, upgrade Ansible itself, I guess, and keep that. So, of course, it's one, say, additional piece of software which you introduce in your system which may have vulnerabilities, but the gain of, say, avoiding other vulnerabilities is much greater than the risk of vulnerabilities with Ansible itself. Or what do you say, Edgar?
Yeah, I agree. I just want to add one thing, because I don't know if So here, how do you manage configuration security issues with Ansible? Okay, so let's say that someone changes configurations on the code. So something do a change in the code. Of course, that code to work, they need to commit the code to Git. And when that person does that, you have one thing called signed commits. So the commit is signed, and of course, this commit will be reviewed by other team members. And if everything is okay, then the code will be used. Otherwise, it will not be used. So the Git also prevents that sort of issues. Let's call it that way, because we can always check what was committed to Git, and of course we can do checkouts and go back one or two versions. So depending on the needs, of course, but the code is always checked. So if someone changes it, needs to do a signed commit, and then other person will check that code and review the code.
Yeah, very good point. It's part of the whole supply chain security of any code, which is quite a popular topic these days. With, as you say, it starts with Git, and where you can have ideally signed commits, so it's not easy to inject things, and then you can check it in different stages throughout the whole supply chain, which now in this case includes Ansible.
That's great. All right, guys, we're 3 minutes to the top of the hour. So I'm going to close out the question and answer period now. Thank you to everybody who did submit questions. And I think we got to all of them, but if we did not, please know that the folks on this webinar, specifically Tomas and Edgar, are going to get a copy of all the questions that came in. And I'm sure they will be more than happy to follow up with you offline to get your question answered. Another quick reminder that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you are having audio troubles during the video portion of the event, please know that you will be getting a copy of you'll be getting a link to access the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to be living on the devops.com website, so you can always go there and look for it as well. Just go to devops.com/webinars and look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. And we promise we will get the video recording up and available to you as soon as possible after today's webinar. So hopefully we won't have a lot of time wasted there, and you guys will be able to get the full webinar on demand for you. Okay, before we get things before we get things wrapped up, I did want to do the drawing for the $425 Amazon gift cards. Let's do that real quick. Our winners today are Tony B. Congratulations, Tony. Michael L. Congratulations, Michael. Robert C. Congratulations, Robert. And Manu S. Congratulations, Manu. We'll be following up with all 4 of you via email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. And if you don't see anything there, please check your spam folder. Tomas and Edgar, what a great presentation. Thank you both so much for your time and your expertise. What a fascinating topic. And judging from the comments we got in the chat box, the audience sure got a lot out of it too. So thank you again. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. A very spirited audience indeed. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm now signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.